The Ukrainian port city of Odessa has been hit by a wave of Russian ballistic missiles overnight, killing 7 and injuring 15, according to officials. The attack comes as US negotiators are set to meet with Russian officials in Florida for another round of peace talks. Ahead of the meeting, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said he would not force Ukraine into any agreement to end Russia's invasion. Well, for more, I'm joined by DW's Russia analyst Konstantin Eggert. Konstantin, great to see you. So, talks on a peace solution for Ukraine are taking place this time in Florida. What are the main sticking points?
Well, Pablo, it seems that the main sticking points are pretty much the same that we heard about before, and that is territorial issues. Moscow, Putin demand pretty much the whole of the eastern region of Donbass, while the Ukrainian delegation says, and President Zelensky says, that they will not recognize Russian occupation or Russian sovereignty, even as Putin wants, over these lands, neither juridically nor factually. So I think that this will be a significant, and still remains basically, a significant issue in these negotiations. And I suppose that this is what the Ukrainian delegation, which essentially just left Miami, headed by Mr. Umerov, the head of the Ukrainian Security Council, discussed with the American representatives.
Now, Putin has again rejected compromise on NATO membership and territory. How fixed are these positions, or could they still shift over time?
Well, it's a great question, because Putin had his marathon annual press conference yesterday, and in it he repeated exactly all the points that he laid out in 2022. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And it is still all about what Putin always calls the root causes of the conflict, meaning essentially regime change in Kiev. So it's interesting that on the one hand, you'll have today Kirill Dmitriev, the Kremlin emissary, speaking to Mr. Witkoff and allegedly Mr. Kushner in Miami. On the other hand, their boss, or rather his boss, President Putin, says, well, basically, my positions didn't change. And I would like to draw your attention to one thing, one particular phrase that Putin used yesterday. We demand respect. Russia wants respect. In the Kremlin parlance, that usually means you do as we tell you. If you do not do as we tell you, then it's not respect. So judge for yourself what kind of chances of success we have now.
Well, US officials say there has been some progress on security guarantees for Ukraine. And Russia is saying the demands remain the same. Do you see any real space for agreement?
Well, there is some in case Russia really moves its positions on the territorial issue. Because so far what we've seen, the progress is that Zelensky agrees, for example, on basically slightly stepping back from demands of, let's say, NATO membership. We've seen progress on the European side, more or less agreeing on some kind of force to be deployed in Ukraine, although essentially quite a lot of details about it are quite hazy. But whenever it comes to the kind of final push with the Russians, it's always pretty much the same. So we'll see. Maybe Putin is just bluffing. And in fact, Dmitriev is going to present some kind of realistic proposals. But we need to see it. So far, our experience is that it always ends pretty much in the same point as far as Russia is concerned.
Let's talk about the pressure, or is there any pressure on Putin at home to show progress either on the battlefield or at the table?
Well, Pablo, Russia is not a democracy. It's a dictatorship. So there is no public pressure, evidently. There is no independent media. There are no rallies demanding the end to war. What, though, we've seen is some signs that people in the regions feel the financial pressure. because inflation is definitely there, as is usually in war-driven economies. There are indications that not conscription, but hiring mercenaries for the war becomes more difficult, and that at the same time the Ministry of Finance and the central bank seem to be reluctant to unleash inflation, essentially print money to hire these people, because they are afraid that the whole economy is going to be destabilized. So these are definitely factors that are going to impact Putin's thinking. But at the same time, it seems like he's still convinced that China and India, i.e. selling hydrocarbons to China and India, is going to bail the Russian economy out. He also counts, evidently, on Russia's demographic advantage. But the size of the population is 4 times more than Ukraine. So I suppose that although there are definitely economic signals that are not favorable to Putin's war, but he seems to be intent on continuing. He told as much yesterday. He said, well, basically, if you don't listen to us, we're prepared to go for another year. And a lot of Russia analysts looked at it and said, well, essentially, he's telling the Russian people, be prepared for at least, and I stress it, at least 1 year of war.
Now, I suppose that wouldn't be very good news to people in Ukraine who are continuing to suffer heavy strikes. We saw overnight that Odessa suffered an attack. What's the latest you can tell us about the situation in the country?
Well, I think if we pay attention, we see that Odessa, which is Ukraine's main port, started to suffer essentially more strikes, more attacks by the Russians, and it seems that, I can only speculate, it seems that it's an attempt to avenge successful Ukrainian attacks on the Russian military base, naval base, in Novorossiysk, also on the Black Sea, on the Russian Black Sea coast. Also, one has to say that the Ukrainian army launched drone attacks yesterday, which were quite successful in targeting 2 central Russian cities, Oryol and Lipetsk, which are not frequently targeted, let's put it like that. And there are indications that a major power plant was damaged there, and there were interruptions in supplies of electricity and water. So, this drone war continues, but it does seem that the Russians really want to eventually incapacitate Odessa, because it's such a key city for Ukraine because of its port facilities and naval base.
All right, Konstantin, we're going to leave it there, but great to get your analysis this morning. DW Russia analyst Konstantin Eggert. Thank you.
Thank you.